opened up the box with my e-spinner to find that I have had a project resting on the bobbins for probably 2 years now, and I think they've probably rested long enough to ply up by now. It is good timing for it. I'm going to be pulling a bag from my personal mystery project bin in a couple of days, and the monthly project could be fibre. Also, I've been doing a lot of knitting lately, and as a result, I have a bit of sensitivity around my right ring finger where I tension the yarn. So instead of knitting, I'm going to ply some floof. Maybe spin a little bit more. The second half of a Fat Cat Knits famous couples spin that I'd started in a live stream a couple of years ago. So there's no reason for me to go into the next month with super rusty skills. If memory serves, these singles started off as, got the bag right here actually. Into the World, August 2014 Classic Fibre Club, Follow the Butterflies, 80/20 Merino Silk Combed Top. And I think I started spinning this as a breather from the Fat Cat Knits spin. At the time, Fat Cat Knits was making club offerings in matched sets, matched pairs, that you could either spin together in various ways or separately for color work. And the pair that I was working on was Sam and Dean from Supernatural. And I chain plied Dean. I seem to recall that with the very vivid colorway, I wasn't 100% happy with the way it turned out, though looking at it now, it's really not all that bad. I think I was going to go a little bit more traditional and do a fractal 3-ply with the Sam, what with the purple, blue, yellow, and white. Hence doing Follow the Butterflies as a 3-ply, probably as practice for Sam. And apparently this is 80/20 Superwash Merino Trilobal Nylon Sparkle Comb Top, which means there's going to be sparkly crap all over the place. In fact, I'm already seeing it clinging to my pants and my shirt. Great. Sparkly. But this is what happens when you dig out your wheels once every 3 to 4 years. In my defense, I have 2 very young cats who like to go after my yarn, so I've been super cautious. The thing is, I've missed taking the time to do a little spinning, so that's what I'm going to do today. Now, a nice thing with plying this stuff is the Electirc Eel Wheel's Lazy Kate just sort of connects up if you want everything to be at the same place. So kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. Or if you want to keep them elsewhere, like I might put these on the floor so that I have a little bit more room, I should be able to move them to where they need to be. And they don't really need a whole lot of tension to keep the bobbins from spinning back on themselves. So that's a good thing. Plying Follow the Butterflies went fairly quickly and took just one afternoon of listening to the TV whilst debugging my process. Particularly the bobbin that wanted to jitterbug across the coffee table due to the vibration of the e-wheel. My solution? I put my cell phone in the path the bobbin wanted to take, thus keeping it mostly in place. I kept the bobbins separate so one errant bobbin wouldn't bring all 3 to the floor in a tangled mess. I know at least one of my angles shows a couple of bobbins perched precariously on the edge of their little coffee table, and it did happen more than once. Once the singles were plied, I wound them onto a DIY nitty-knotty made out of plastic pipe from instructions found somewhere online. Someday I'll make a hand crank skein winder, but for now, this does the trick. Then it was into a 15-minute soak in cool water and soak detergent. After, I gently squeezed out what water I could, wrapped the skein in an old towel that I don't mind dye possibly bleeding onto, and then did the stompy to get out as much water as possible. I hung the skein to dry for a couple of days, and with that, Follow the Butterflies is a completed yarn. Recently, someone in my comments had a question about spinning in regard to a knitting project I was working on. Basically, one strand of yarn wasn't doing the trick and neither were two strands of yarn held together, so I spun 3 strands of yarn together via my e-spinner and used that instead. They were asking about whether there was anything I needed to know to spin those strands together, and the answer is yes. It's all about the direction you're spinning. When you spin a single, which when set can be used as a yarn in its own right, like this, you spin it either to the right or to the left. That results in a directional twist to the single, and when spinning, that's either called Z twist or S twist. If you think of the middle part of a Z or an S, it makes sense because that section either slants right or left. If I recall correctly, the standard way to spin a single strand of yarn is Z. The slant of the twist will be to the right. Whatever way you spin your single, you ply in the opposite direction. So if you spun the single to the right with a Z twist, you spin in the opposite direction, S twist, when plying those strands together. And I could probably go into further detail as to why, but the long and short of it is physics. It's all to do with the energy stored in those spun fibers and how spinning gathers that energy and plying locks the energy of those single plies into place. One of the easiest ways to see this in action is to get a single ply of yarn. And you can find them at any yarn store and just start twisting it by hand until it folds back on itself. That is twisted back on itself and plying in the opposite direction that I spun. If you're interested in learning how to spin but you don't have a lot of cash for new tools, the good news is that it's a lot less expensive than you think. You can make a drop spindle with a dowel and an old CD. So if your parents still have a cache of old AOL CDs kicking around their home office from the late 90s to early 2000s, there you go. Just don't use their music CDs or their Blu-rays because right now those are coming back in vogue and they might get mad. Some folks have used dowels and toy wheels found at craft stores. I believe that Jillian Eve has a whole playlist on beginning spinning, including spindle hacks. Fibre is generally available through yarn stores, independent dyers, and at craft fairs featuring fibre vendors. So if you outgrow your DIY spindle, those are also places you can find new ones, and there's a lot of variety to choose from if you really love spindle spinning. I have a couple of spindles somewhere around here, but I prefer wheel spinning. Slightly different coordination skills and less chance of a cat mistaking the drop spindle for a cat toy. So, spinning Z and plying S. That gives you a good, stable yarn for knitting. Can you do it the other way around? Sure, you can spin S and ply Z. Apparently it works really well for yarn that's going to be crocheted. Now let's say you have strands of already plied yarn that you want to spin together. If memory serves, that's a cabled yarn. So you have singles, plies, and now cables. You've probably seen metal cables twisted around each other as a bundle in the wild. Same principle. A cable will be spun in the opposite direction to a ply. So find out what direction the yarn is twisting, and then ply in the opposite direction. The more plies, the rounder the yarn, and the more space it takes up. You may find a 2-ply knits fairly flat, but a 3-ply is a little beefier and stronger. A cabled yarn will take up even more space. Depending on the amount of plies and wool used, it may even change the warmth of the item being made. It's definitely something I recommend experimenting with. This is from a fiber club back in 2015. Fat Cat Knits was doing a famous couples series, and this one is Salmon Dean. It is a very pretty squishy. In fact, I'll bring it up here again because I think that the lighting here is a little bit better. And I thought that we'd play with this because the colors speak to me a little bit more than the last bump that we did. I think I'm going to start with the Dean. So we'll start with the reds. Watching them pull apart is so satisfying. Yes, it is. And when they pull apart well, just... what I plan on doing is 4 repeats of the patterns, so that's why I divided it into 4 smaller pull aparts. Forbidden cinnamon buns. They do look like forbidden cinnamon buns, don't they? They're sparkly and black and red. And you don't really see it in this lighting, but my goodness. That red, it's like ruby slippers. It's one of the reasons why I had to take a picture. Look at that. Finally got a bit of time to sit down, try to finish off the rest of this bump of fiber. I think that's what people call it, is a bump. The Sam bit of the Fat Cat Knits Fiber Club from, what was it, I think 2013, 2014, somewhere in there. Anyways, the cats were going bonkers earlier on, and they finally settled down. I mean, who needs hackles or a blending board when you've got a small cat with claws who is very happy to sit there and try to eat your fiber while you're trying to spin it. But we're on the last little bit of bobbin 2. And then it's bobbin 3. Which is good because I pulled my mystery project for January just the other day, and it's the Into the World flounce fiber. Very pretty. I think it's blue faced luster and tussa silk or something along those lines. I think it was part of the Luxe Club back in 2014, somewhere in there. Beautiful stuff, very purple, and I've only seen a couple of instances of it spin up. When I was part of the Into the World Fiber Club back in the day, I'd take a look on their community site on Ravelry, and people would post up what they had done with their fiber. Basically, they'd show what they spun, how they spun it, not in any kind of detail, just basically, here's my skein, it's really pretty. And then they might show what they made from it. Might. Anyhow, I think there were only 2 of the flounce that I saw, maybe 3. I'm going to have to take a look at the fiber to see exactly how it spins up and how thick the, I guess, top or roving or whatever it is, because it could very well be that it's a long, slender bit of fluff, and thus it will be more likely to want to be chain plied, for instance. If, however, it can be 2-plied, it might make for some lovely shawl fluff, make for lovely shawl yarn, Or, who knows, I don't think socks. I think it'll probably be something like a shawl or hand warmers or something. Something that's a little bit bougie. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes. You never know. I might decide to run with the rest of the crowd and finally try that Sophie shawl or scarf or whatever that everybody's all up in arms about. When I was starting out, it was called Bactus, and it just didn't have the I-cord edge. So I don't understand why everybody's going a little bit gaga over it. It's just a garter stitch scarf. Could make a hitchhiker scarf out of it, to be honest. I do have the hitchhiker pattern. I've used it a few times in the past. It's really versatile. I rather like it. I think I've made like 2, maybe 3 hitchhikers. So that might be one to dig out of the vault and try with some of my hand spun. I did that for a friend once using some very busy, very colorful yarn, and last I recall her saying she absolutely loved it and was really happy that I gave her the rest of the skein of yarn that I had made it with. So we'll see. We'll see. Maybe I'll make myself my own hand-spun, hand-knit hitchhiker scarf scarf. I'm going to go back to spinning because apparently my brain is just in the mood to just watch television and spin yarn. And I have a cat who's trying to eat the tripod. I am so sorry. Alright, you may hear some noises in the background because cats, there's always cats around here, and they've just been having a case of the zoomies and trying to get into as much trouble as possible, so there's that. I finished plying up the yarn, or at least I finished making the single plies. I guess that's the way to put it, single spin. And I thought I was going to have to label each of the bobbins, but as it turns out, not only did I use differently colored bobbins for each of the singles, but it's pretty easy to tell them apart because the first bit that we spun had the most amount of color for the longest amount of space. So whether or not this is in focus, you should be able to tell that those are pretty big chunks of color. Makes sense, right? The second skein has a little bit less colors, but it's repeated more often. So you'll notice the chunks of color repeat a little more often. And finally, the last ply that we made, so this was split in 2, this was split in 4, this was split in 8. So it's a fractal spin, right? 2, 4, 8. Lots of chunks of color. More of them. And what that's going to do is it's hopefully going to distribute color a little bit more evenly down the skein and probably get a little bit of striping going on there. So we'll see how this is actually going to turn out. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this yarn looks when I'm done. And they're going to be 2 very different yarns. So this Sam will look very different from the original Dean. So what we're going to do now is we are going to ply up Sam. make him into a 3-ply yarn. Then turn him into a skein. So put it on the skein winder or nitty knotty made out of PVC piping because it was cheap. Take it into the powder room, put it in a soak bath. I prefer unscented soak detergent because it's very mild and doesn't give me any kind of breakouts, so I don't react badly to it, and it's unscented, so it doesn't give me any migraines. Yay. The final step will be after we've gently squished out as much of the water as possible, and you can do that by very gently squishing it in your hands and then rolling it up in a towel and stomping on it. In this case, I'd have to do that probably in one of the bathrooms where it's not hardwood. And then what I'll do is just toss the skein over the shower curtain rod in one of the bathrooms so that it can dry out over the next day or two, and we'll see how that looks. I enjoyed spinning this up more than you know. And I know things take the time they take, but I didn't expect 4 years to go by between Sam and Dean, who are now reunited, so yay! I tried filming the spun up floof outside, but it was really bright and all I could see was how glittery the glittery stuff is. I think they called it trilobal. I think the brand names are something like Stellina or Angelina. Some sort of nylon. It's kind of crunchy when spun up and otherwise just gets everywhere. So while it's pretty, it definitely wasn't the highlight of my experience. And it occurred to me after skimming the 2 live streams where I spun Dean that I was also going to chain ply Sam, which is why I was spinning up Follow the Butterflies in 3-ply as a palette cleanser. So it all makes sense now. I have no idea what I'd like to make from either Follow the Butterflies or Sam and Dean. I'm kind of waiting for them to tell me what they want to be, which of course will probably happen around 3 a.m. on a trip back from the washroom when I don't have a pencil and paper anywhere nearby. Follow the Butterflies came out to about 368 yards of 3-ply. Sam is around 192 yards and Dean is approximately 232 yards. They're all around fingering to DK weight. The numbers are all approximate because I'm going on a rough estimate based on the length around the nitty knotty when skeining. I'm saving up for a cone winder from Dreaming Robots, the folks who made my little e-spinner, and when I put in my order, I plan to also get their yarn counter, so then I'll hopefully have more accurate numbers. From what I'm seeing here, Follow the Butterflies could be a small shawl, or a hat and fingerless mitts, or one of the hats that takes a bit more yarn like a tam, or I think it's called Muscle Burrow or Musselberg by Isolde Teague. Pretty popular. I could possibly also make them into socks. It is a fairly hardy 3-ply, but I'm always afraid of making socks from my handspun because I don't want to wear through them too quickly, but it is a thought. I could also make a neck warmer. One of the things on my to-do list maybe is color work with some black or white croy as a contrast. It's a thought at least. The Sam and Dean, I've considered turning each of them into a Sophie scarf or a hitchhiker, something simple and functional and warm. Mostly to show off the different spinning techniques, chain ply versus fractal, and how they result in different fabrics. If you have any suggestions or want to weigh in on some of the ideas I've already floated, please let me know, and while you're down in the comments, maybe boop the like button and subscribe if you're not already. As always, I'd like to thank my Craft Coven, Patreon members and channel supporters who help keep this show on the proverbial road. I know I've been a bit behind on cat pictures. They've gotten faster as they've gotten bigger. And if I want to get my fabric cut out for this month's sewing project, I should do so soon before the Chinook ends and I can't put them out in the sunroom for a half hour at a time.